Hi, welcome to another edition of What's This Show For? FOR Friends of Ron. I'm your host, Ron Levitsky. Today's show is entitled Homecoming, an American Experience. My adult daughters have their own way of speaking, and a lot of times instead of just saying, I'll call you or get together, they'll say, I'm going to reach out for you, or I'm going to connect with you. Connection is something in our society that I think becomes more and more valued as we lose more and more of it. It seems that the more devices we have, the less human contact we have. And a lot of other people have thought about that as well and made observations or written books. And we're lucky enough to have one such author with us today, Kathy DeNiccolo. So Kathy, welcome to the show. And I'm always interested in the guests who appear, but the fact that we're both retired teachers, I do some writing, you've done some writing, it kind of makes me connected to you in many ways. So I'm delighted to have you here. We usually start out by discussing a little bit of the guest background, and you have an interesting background, certainly. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an Illinois resident for my whole life, really. I was born in Illinois and actually raised in Chicago, worked in Chicago, spent a lot of time there with my family, and it's really where I got a sense of being connected to Chicago, if we want to use that word. I mean, now when I go somewhere else, I'm always very happy. I mean, I've traveled all over the world, but I'm always very, very happy to come back home.
So you're like Frank Sinatra, Chicago.
I didn't want to say that, but yes,
and
it's
speaking
true.
of Frank Sinatra, you're of Italian heritage.
Yes.
And one stereotypes Italian families is fairly large, and yours sort of was, but sort of wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
What about your family experience?
Well, I was an only child. I wasn't blessed with brothers and sisters, etc., but I was blessed with an extended family. My cousins, my aunts, my uncles, very, very good friends. A lot of times you hear the word comare, compare, you see that, you hear it, paesano, in Italian, in reference to Italian culture. And the Italian-American community was very much a part of me as I grew up. And to this day, the people that I grew up with, I don't see them nearly as much as I would like to see them. But I consider them my core. And, as always, good friends, you cannot see each other maybe for a few weeks, few months, but then the holidays come around, or you make opportunities to get together.
Yeah.
And maybe they're all the more dear because we do. And just for a minute, I was concerned in telling you why I wrote these books and what was behind the books. I was concerned with the amount of time that we would have these get-togethers, and there'd be so many people on the phone. It would make such an effort to get together, whether it be with your nuclear family or your aunts and cousins or good friends, and within a few minutes, I could see the phones coming out.
I think everybody of our generation has had that same feeling. I have had it with my kids. My grandson would rather be playing a computer game than eat a bowl of chocolate ice cream, and then I knew there was something wrong.
That's right.
But that's very true. Okay, and early on, you sort of honed in on a career that you wanted to follow, right?
I always wanted to be a teacher.
And why was that?
I just looked up to teachers. Education was very, very important in my family. The phrase, school comes first. School is first. Do your homework before you do anything else. Don't even talk to me about doing anything else. So I knew that teaching was important. and I knew that the lessons that you learned from what went on at school, that was important too. And so I viewed teachers as very, very important parts of our society.
And you were both, I believe, an educator, but being a teacher and a school administrator. And after retirement, you mentored younger teachers?
I did. I was kind of been all around the teaching table, you know.
Yeah.
While I was a teacher, I was also taking classes and finishing a master's degree and other classes. And so I knew what it felt like to be the teacher, but I knew what it felt like to be the student. And from my own experience, to be the parent. And as the years went by, I knew what it was to be the grandparent, the so-called elder, looking at all of this. And so, yes, I had a very professional career in that I was a teacher, I was a coordinator, I had supervisory responsibilities, I had administrative responsibilities, and then came full circle, so to speak, because then I ended up being faculty at a university and liaison person between the university and the teachers.
Okay, so it sounds like a really rich and rewarding career, but as they say, when you retire, it's always good to retire to something rather than from something. Mm-hmm. And as much as you enjoy teaching, you seem to jump in to another career, equally, I think it sounds like equally fascinating for you, and that is writing. So where did you get your love of literature, writing?
I think that from when I was a little girl, my grandparents, who spoke what you might call broken English, or spoke to me in Italian, but they told me stories. Or they sang, my grandfather in particular, liked to sing operas to me. And so I say, what's that opera about? And what's that person about? And why did they do that? And he would explain the characters. And of course, in my household, there was a one-liner for everything. There was and this is true, I think, of so many cultures, you know, that they have their proverbs, their folk tales, and I like those things. You know, today we talk a little bit about STEM, and now we talk about STEAM, you know, science, technology, engineering, math, and now the arts have a place back in that. And to me, it brought the whole world together when I would listen to those stories, and then my mother, in particular, would read to me. And we always had books around the house, books, magazines, newspapers. And my dad, I remember, used to work very long hours. My mother worked at home besides the domestic skillet. And we didn't have time to go to the library. And now that sounds like so arcane, you know, to go to a library. They have libraries at their fingertips. But I didn't have one, so I had an encyclopedia. I remember my dad bought that, so that there was no excuse. School came first, right? Yeah. There was no excuse not to do my homework.
So when you started reading books on your own, what were some of your favorite books?
I liked books that told about family sagas, you know, how family, what was the course of history? What happened with this family? And so I did like Dandelion Wine. I liked that book. My all-time favorite, To Kill a Mockingbird. It's funny, a lot of people, that book is sentimental to a lot of people. And
those books seem to have sort of social commentary. That's important to you?
They do have social value in that you find out how the people lived in that particular culture, in that particular area, And whether you agree with the decisions they made, those books are, I think, are so well written in terms of the characters. And the characters, you know, you'll hear a lot about characters drive plot. And that's very true, but the characters that really drive plot are the ones that, as human beings from all walks of life, from all cultural areas, from all economic levels, people love characters that they care about.
Okay.
Heartwarming
Well, it sounds
characters.
like you're speaking now as a writer and author who knows a little the
guess I
inside.
am.
Let's talk about that. So, I think a lot of people would like to write, and many do, but many kind of founder because they don't quite know. You know, I could just get a notebook, but I think you found some assistance in terms of helping generate ideas on how to write. Can you talk about? Let's look at the creative side first. The process of writing. Who helped you? Where did you go for support?
Well, you know, one of the things I've always believed in is this lifelong learning. And even though I left teaching, I took a lot of those skills with me, right? So I knew that a sort of process to use. And I knew how to ask people for their help, or for their help in terms of what were their ideas about this new project that I was, you know, that I was going to be doing. I was going to be writing, and honestly, Ron, friends of mine would say, "That's a pretty big leap, isn't it?" You know, they say, you know, if you were a celebrity, then, you know, the book would write itself. People would buy it. Wouldn't matter what you wrote. Or they'd say, you know, if you were a genius, you could probably carry this off. But you, and I thought, I know this is something new for me, but I just feel that, you know, I've had this calling in me. I knew that at some point in my life I was going to write a book. Maybe I made that decision long ago, right? On my parents' lap, as I listened to my grandparents and this type of thing. But I knew the power of words. And I could go on with that,
yeah,
but that's another issue.
What were there any groups that helped you?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of places that I went. One of the places that I started out was at the community college level.
Okay.
And
was that Oakton?
That was Oakton.
Okay.
And what I did there is I took a course on publishing and e-publishing and self-publishing. And so with that, I got an overview of the mechanics of it. And then the next step was I joined OCWW, which is off-campus writers' workshop. And that was another thing that I was able to get involved in for really not much money at all. You know, the course at Oakton, at the time, I think maybe it was $100 or $150. I took some money that I had gotten and saved it up, you know, and I thought, because I was very careful, I didn't want to, you know, I was newly retired, I didn't want to garner debt. So I looked for the most bang for the buck, so to speak, and Oakton Community College was certainly a place to start.
Okay.
And the people at OCWW were very generous in their workshops, and the people that came for phenomenal presentation money.
Okay. And I know that there's a business side, which we'll get to in a moment, because I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about your book, which is called Connected: An American Homecoming. And I'll hold it up here for a moment if we can get a close-up. And while we're doing that, why don't you tell me, to the audience, the genesis of the book, how this particular book got started.
that book, that book actually was a call to action for me, and I didn't like violence. I didn't like the violent solutions that I was seeing on television, and I certainly didn't like the violence that I was seeing on the streets. And the final point was I didn't like the violence in the schools.
Okay, and so the story of Connected, it's intergenerational, it's very moving. Tell us how you came upon the basic idea of the plot and the major characters.
Well, you start, I wanted to tell this story so that it applied very much to ages 6th, 7th, and 8th. That was my target market. And I wanted to use language that was pitched at a 7th grade level,
okay.
6th, 7th grade level. Those were the mechanics of it. And then I wanted to deal with some of the issues that I was hearing about on radio and the television and at the kitchen table and discussions with friends and things that I would hear people in the neighborhood talking about, the problems. And I wanted to try and extend, because remember, it was a surprise to me almost to think, I've left so many jobs, not doing that anymore. But maybe it was so important because when I left those jobs, I didn't leave the skill. And so as I began to think about my story, I thought, wouldn't it be something if I could write a story that helped extend the best practices for pitching a story to young people, to partnering with the community so that they would really, really understand, not sort of understand how it feels to be bullied, not kind of understand what it is not to fit in because you don't have whatever's the popular style of the day. And so that was the beginning of the story.
So one aspect, one element of the story is the idea of the outsider, the idea of not fitting in or being bullied because you're in some way different, which certainly kids can relate to, and all of us. I mean, it's a universal theme. We've all probably been through that, and so we all can feel compassion, I would think, for people in that situation. The two main characters, one is junior high boy and his grandmother. And why did you choose the grandmother as opposed to a parent or a friend, or, another elder?
There's a joke about grandparents and grandchildren, and there are a lot of talk about why are they so close, and sometimes the punchline is maybe they feel they have a common enemy, in that the young people, their parents are there for rules, regulations, goal setting, and that doesn't rest easy. That's something you don't necessarily want to hear. Being pushed on and encouraged, you don't necessarily want to hear that. Yet, with this world of distraction we're living in, we need to focus, and that's the parent job. So often is to focus their children. But I wanted to focus on a different idea. I wanted to talk about what was important for a lifetime, conversations. I almost called this book Conversations of Love.
Mm-hmm.
Conversations that tell you I'm listening.
Is any of this in any way autobiographical? Were you close to your grandmother?
Oh, yeah. Of course I was. Came from very close-knit family, and I found it very easy to talk to my grandmother.
And really
even though, whether it be in English or in Italian, or sometimes not even with words.
Yeah. Much of the book, it's really a conversation between the grandmother and the grandson. And there's really two parallel stories, which is really interesting, where you have the grandmother's story as a girl or a young woman immigrating. And that's a story that runs parallel to the challenges that the boy has. Mm-hmm. And his grandmother kind of helps him with a project, ostensibly, but helps him figure out bigger issues. So the outsider is important. Now, the grandmother's story picks up the theme of immigration, and that's a real hot topic, as news. Was your intent to kind of include a controversial topic to kind of pique people's interest, or was it simply part of the story?
Excuse me for coughing.
Sorry.
I did not mean this book to be a political statement at all. I meant this book to be a small book with big ideas. And so I wasn't interested in stating a case for immigration. However, many, many, many people have drawn that conclusion. And they're not necessarily just people of Italian background, but they're people of all different walks of life. But that was never my intention to make a political statement about it. People have drawn their own conclusions about that.
And of course, looking at the grandmother as an individual, the readers drawn to the grandmother and her story, and sympathetic with her as an individual, and her husband and the struggles that they have had, and then bring it up to we won't give anything away, but bring it up to the present and the struggles the grandmother still has. Very, very moving. You included a companion piece, which is called Sidekick, an activity book for the family, an activity book companion to Connected in American Homecoming. So we got up here for the audience to take a look at. We can focus that in a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. And it's a cute book. And hold it, if we can hold it there, let me just open a couple pages, kind of see what's going on here. Oh, we can get that back. Yeah, so here we go. So it's different things to think about. And now this accompanies, or can accompany, the major book you've written. It's an activity book. Tell us a little bit about why you decided to add an activity book.
Initially, when I wrote Connected, I put in a series of questions and answers, reader's response, activities, etc. And then I thought that this is too confusing, and I have to focus on one thing at a time. So one of the things that I tried to focus on in Sidekick was this idea of establishing one language or a common language. That was why I wrote Connected, so that I could demonstrate some of the best practices in education, so that I could have a circle of communication wider and wider, more effective. That was why I wrote it. So Sidekick then picks up with some of the important conversations, not all of them from Connected, but it does pick up on important conversations. I like to say that whatever I've done has been done in connection with C8. important conversations to talk to
Yeah.
each other about.
And I found some of these ideas really fun and clever. Just like me, what animal or character resembles you? You know, write a letter to someone, give someone a treat today by finding a letter in their mailbox. And I have a friend who still basically writes letters, not emails. And I got to admit, I love it when I get something in the mail. It was interesting when we spoke, you know, you wrote this as a companion piece to Connections, which I would think would be more for junior high. But I looked at this and thought this would be something for I could talk to my 5-year-old grandson with some of these ideas.
Well, you know, Ron, that was a surprise to me. I did not expect that grandparents and parents and aunts and uncles and really people, it was my hope that in some of the communities, sports programs would pick up on some of these ideas. It was my hope that the common vocabulary be extended and from Sidekick on these.
Before you continue, no. I just want to get your email up. We're a little tech challenge today, but want to get this up so the audience can see it before we run out of time. But please go ahead and so it's KFD 2650 at yahoo.com, right?
Yes.
KFD 2650 at yahoo.com. I'll hold this up for a bit, and why don't you continue your point?
I also wrote Sidekick because some of my sidekicks said to me, Kathy, I want to do this. I want to write this story. Where do I begin? I said, well, you know, you have to begin by brainstorming some of these, you know, typical teacher response. But at the same point, that is the process of writing. And so I wanted this book to be a tool where young people could sit with their friends, that they could do some of these activities. And I also wanted it to be user-friendly. I wanted it to be not a particular minority, not a particular class of people.
Sure.
I wanted it to be a source book, really, so that people would be comfortable. I want to use these terms, diversity and inclusion, and I want to use this term of involving people in an interactive exchange communication. One of the C8 words, right?
Of course, and in the C8, I'll read them off. Character, connected, community, communicate, coach, collaborate, critical thinking, and creativity. And as a teacher, I recognize a lot of these that we try to put in the affective area of education. And it seems that the Sidekick, going along with the Connected book, the kind of a perfect match there of one helping students understand what it is to be isolated, that you're really not alone, and then what are activities that you can connect with other people, and then the C8, words that are important for all of us. Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy DeNiccolo, for bringing Connected, an American Homecoming, and Sidekick. And these you can look for on your website and go to your name or check with you through your email, and people can connect with you that way. So again, thank you so much, Kathy DeNiccolo, Ron Levitsky, for What's This Show For? FOR, Friends of Ron, saying I look forward to seeing you next time.